don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to fail school today. I feel good about failing. You can't. You have to cover it up psychologically and make excuses, and then that leads to all kinds of cognitive dissonance and psychological torments because you have to justify why we are the way that we are. And it isn't until you examine yourself that the unconscious motivations of your life become conscious. And if you never analyze yourself, if you never bring the unconscious up into the conscious, why we do the things that we do, you're just going to always do what you've always done. And you're going to call it fate. Can't help it. I'm a Libra. That's just how I am. Another reason is because I interact with parents sometimes, and they're not really interacting with me. They're interacting with an avatar. In other words, I'm not Scanlon. I'm, I don't know, Ms. Maureen from 1988 or whatever, when they were in high school. You follow? In other words, it's like I hated my English teacher, and you're an English teacher, and when I was in high school, I wish I would have said some things. I'm gonna say them now, so parents will start acting like 35 or 40-year-old 15-year-olds, you know? And not really me. I'm an avatar. I'm something else. But it's because of their lived life, those experiences that they had, and they start acting towards me the way they would act towards their teacher if they were that age back then. And so you still learn about people. But again, I also learn a lot about you guys. I learn a lot about your parents just by virtue of the fact that you're here and how you behave in here. I don't have to meet your parents. I've met you. I've met the product of that. I know we hate hearing that. It's like, I'm nothing like my parents. Yeah, you are. You just don't realize it yet. As you get older, in fact, I may even piss you off. Any of you guys, maybe you have a mom who, whenever they want to piss you off, they say, you're just like your dad. Oh, and that sets you off. That's like your little button there. I'm nothing like my dad. And then as you get older, one day you're going to be walking down the street, I don't know, coming back from the supermarket, and you're just going to stop going, I'm just like my dad. Wow, and then hopefully at that point you're going to think, that's not such a bad thing, actually. That's actually a pretty good thing. Yeah? Because you're going to maybe understand maybe differently or more focusedly why they are the way that they are, why they do the things that they do. One of the really hard realizations for us as people is to realize that the people around us are people. In other words, we learn that our parents are people. If you have, for example, if your dad's very protective of you, it's good. Because one of the best predictors of your success in life, girls, is your relationship with your dad. It's one of the best predictors of your success in life. And if you have a dad who says, you stay away from guys. Why? Because guys only want one thing, you can't trust them. You can look at your dad and ask your dad, who was she, Dad? How do you know so much? I don't want to talk about it. I just stay away. That's good, though. It's a protective vibe, man. If you have that's why it's good to have those two balances, because you might also have the parents who will be very hot. I'm thinking of one student at one time that the parents were very hostile towards me. I mean, I remember being in the office with a dad, and as soon as they walked in, it was just like tension and anger, And the dad, I said some whatever. I was just Scanlon, and the dad said, "You wouldn't say that to me if we were outside." So I was honest with him. I said, "Let's go outside and find out." And then why not? I like fighting. And then the AP's like, "Oh, hold on, no, we don't need to." And then turns out he wasn't down. Why did he say that to me? Because he was thinking of himself in high school, that he hated his teachers, and he assumed a lot about me. Now, when the guy left, how was it? Dude gave me a hug. I'm glad. He was big. I don't want to fight him, but I guess if you have to, why not? But yeah, he was a bigger dude. And sometimes you don't really realize how big the dude is until he stands up. And he gave me, he's like, come here. He gave me a big hug. He's like, I appreciate you, man. I was kind of, don't even worry about it, man. He's a good dude, but he was living vicariously because of what he went through in high school, and he kind of assumed. And he probably, I don't know, maybe he had terrible teachers, maybe he had terrible people around him. And that's the only frame of reference that he has. And so I could get really hostile with him and be like, well, you need to, people make mistakes, man. None of us wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a jerk today. We wake up in the morning and we just exist, man. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's evil. Most of the time it's just in between, but largely it's free of decisions. Like we don't wake up and say, I'm gonna be this way today. If you do, you're probably a good person, because that takes effort to wake up and say, you know what? I'm gonna interact with people today who are going to be angry, they're gonna be rude, they're gonna be short-sighted, they're gonna be self-centered, but that's only because they don't think about it the same way that I do. And so you don't have, so when you understand that, you drop a lot of anger towards people. You know, like you'll see, I'm sure I had those teachers who'd come in and be angry all the time. I'd ask them, like, why would you do this job then? Like, can you imagine like going to a job every day that makes you angry and hostile? I mean, I can't imagine it, because I see some of those people. And then I see some teachers who they're able to understand. You forget what it was like to be a kid. You forget what it was like to be a 10th grader. I remember sitting in my 10th grade English class with my teacher, Ms. Gilly, which is so weird I remember her name. I only remember her name because it rhymed with silly. And she was weird, man. She would start singing to you in the middle of class, out of nowhere. And I remember my friend, Lisa, doing a line of cocaine off of her desk. You know, oh, that gets everyone's attention. You know? And so when people say like, you know, Scanlon, you just don't know how they are. Well, yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know if anyone's worse than doing a line of cocaine off of their desk. You shouldn't do it. But when they say like, oh, the kids these days, I remember her doing a line of cocaine off of a desk in 10th grade English. Do I think that things have changed that much? I mean, I hope you're not doing lines of cocaine, but I just mean when we complain and say things are so much worse today. Yeah, things have their own challenges today. But this is all of us kind of living through that lived life that we had and assuming that the whole world is just like us. But we're not. The world is different. People are different. There's a variety of reasons that we do the things that we do. And I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to fail school today. I feel good about failing. You can't. You have to cover it up psychologically and make excuses. And then that leads to all kinds of like cognitive dissonance and psychological torments, because you have to like justify why we are the way that we are. And it isn't until you examine yourself that the unconscious motivations of your life become conscious. And if you never analyze yourself, then you're going to do what you, in other words, if you never bring the unconscious up into the conscious, why we do the things that we do, you're just going to always do what you've always done. And you're going to call it fate. Can't help it. I'm a Libra. That's just how I am. But there is no just how you are. There is why you are the way that you are, but there's always what you could fix and become better at if you want to. And that's why one of the worst things that we can sell a person is, you're perfect just the way that you are. Because we all know that we're not. We all know that we could be more. We all know that the thing that people say that about us, they don't know how we really are. That's why I think it's funny when people will say that to me, like, oh, you have this one student and they're really friendly with you, but you don't know who they really are. I know, probably. Yeah. So I think that they, usually you can tell, you hear things all over the place, but then again, a reputation is just opinion. I had a great story, man. Did I tell you guys about this? I think when I was talking about the letter of introduction, I had a student from my first period class who afterwards he said that, I asked, did any of you guys have like relatives or family members who had me in the past? One guy said, yeah, you had my brother. Actually, there were a whole bunch of them in the first period. And one guy said, yeah, you had my brother. Did I mention this last time? Because it was right before you guys came in. And he said that his brother had me, and that his brother told him a story about how he ran into me at a bar, and he bought me a shot, and I did shots with him. And I said, that's a great story. That's a great story. And I did something I almost never do. I corrected it. Because it never happened. I know it never happened. Because I've only had alcohol one time in my life. I didn't even know who his brother was. But I've literally only had alcohol one time in my life. And I was living in England at the time. And that's where I did it. I drank 4 shots of something, 2 Jack and Cokes, and a bottle of wine. I was in Stratford-upon-Avon, and it was over the course of a whole evening. So did that happen with the bar? No. But it's a neat lesson. That the only reason I corrected it was because I was making the point that reputation is usually just opinion of people, or reputation is false memory a lot of times from people. And so even like the lived life that we had, it goes through this lens of our trauma. and our lenses of understanding. It's this thick layer of personality that we all walk around the world like surrounded by. So every experience that we have gets filtered through that. If you think that if your experience from high school was that your teachers were all mean and cruel and terrible, and then you have children someday and your kid says, I didn't do anything wrong today, I'm an angel. It's a good thing to remember, by the way, so was Satan, but we'll drop that for a second. But I was an angel. Your parents very well might believe you because they're thinking of themselves when they were in high school. Yeah, I got picked on too by teachers. I'm going to go talk to that teacher. I'm going to straighten this out. Yeah. And so, it's if you're aware, well, I'll leave it at that. And so, it's not is it that the parents are stupid? Of course not. Of course not. Is it because the parents are just gullible and naive? No, of course not. It's because your parents are like everybody else, as I began by saying. Everybody is human. Everyone is a person. And we tend to elevate people and go, but they're different because they're this, but they're that. No. You realize that. Especially you guys, if you guys have, if your dad's in your life, I don't care how big your dad is, you're not as strong as your dad. In other words, dad's always just strong. Or dad's always just like, he's better at sports, or he's always this, he's always that. And then the day will come where one day you'll beat him in an arm wrestling match, and you'll be like, holy crap. Who did I just see? Rampage Jackson, an MMA fighter. And his son's training, and he's telling his son, you will never beat me. I don't care how much. And then his son's like, I'll get you, son. And they start like pushing each other. They're playing around, and then his son out-grapples him. And it's the first time he ever did. And his dad's like, oh, well, whatever. I'm tired. And his son was just like blown away by this. Like, oh my God, I didn't think I was actually going to win this. And Rampage Jackson, if you know who he is, he's like one of the greatest of all time. Even the greatest of all time gets surpassed eventually. And that is the goal and the hope of all teachers, of all parents, that the younger generation will become better. Because you're right about that part over here, that oftentimes the things that our parents did not do are the things that they really want us to do. But again, they're humans. Understand why. It's not because they don't respect you. It's not because they hate you. It's because they're thinking like, man, I really wish I could have played baseball at Hawaii State. I really wish I could have done this one thing. There's a student here. Actually, no, she graduated last year. She was, both of her parents grew up in Mexico. Her dad dropped out of school, I think she said like 7th grade. Her mom never went past 5th grade. But they worked their asses off, and they had a motor. They came to this country, and they built they accumulated some money, some wealth. And growing up, she would say that if she was like, I want to ride horses. They go, you want to ride horses? Yeah, okay. The very next week, she was enrolled in horseback training. And then she's like, I don't want to do that anymore. I like gymnastics. That looks fun. Really? Okay. And they put her in gymnastics for a while to see if she liked that. Every time she said that she wanted to do something, they would put her into that because they wanted her to find the thing that she loved, and they didn't want any of those barriers to stop her because they remembered what that was like. They wanted to be better than they had. So, yeah, notice he's not saying it in a terrible thing. It's not a bad thing. He's just stating it as a fact. The way that we raise people up has everything to do with how we were. There's a reason that I teach the way that I teach. Because I think of myself, I think of the teachers I had, and I'm like, man, I wish a teacher had been more blank. Or I wish my teacher had been less blank. Most of us as teachers were acting out the things that we wish that we had had when we were a student. And so whether you might be bored out of your mind, you might hate it, but just understand why it is that we do the things that we do. In the same way that as a teacher, I can never lose sight of why it is that you do the things that you do. And by the way, there's a reason as I'm talking to you, I always take a look at the camera real quick. Because I want every talk that I do to be between 13 and 15 minutes. I don't want it to be short. I don't want it to be too long. Because I wish that I had developed that muscle earlier to be able to engage an idea for more than like 3 minutes at a time. Because when you do that, you can start to develop, the ability to think about things for extended periods of time. So everything has a reason, everything has a logic, everything has a purpose, and that's on everybody's end. So 15 minutes is up though. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Dope. Happy Wednesday.